This is every single fight to make next after UFC Fight Night Austin Dariush versus Tsarukyan. I have all of the key fighters from that card on the screen right now. Some winners, some losers, and you may notice there is an empty box next to all of them, and that's where their next opponent's going to go, who I have hidden around the perimeter of the screen. I'll slowly reveal their opponents one by one as the video goes on and place them where they belong on the screen. Let's start straight away with the main event. Arman Tsarukyan destroys Brady Dariush immediately into the fight. There's a fighter that wants to fight at UFC 300 in the lightweight division, in the top 5, and I'm sick and tired of him wanting super fights all the time. You owe it to your division to fight people coming up underneath you, Dustin Poirier. It was the same situation with Justin Gaethje before he fought Rafael Fiziev, and you know what? I respect Gaethje because he took on Fiziev and he won. Dustin Poirier, I bet you were the guy who was coming up at one point in your career like, why aren't the top guys wanting to fight me? Why aren't the top guys wanting to fight me? There comes a time in every fighter's career, star or not, where they have to be a potential stepping stone for an up-and-coming contender. And the only place for Arman Tsarukyan to go from here is either to rematch Gamrot, which I don't really want to see right now, and I'd rather Gamrot get a fight against another top contender himself, or to fight Dustin Poirier. He has to fight someone above him in the rankings or someone who's beaten him. And the only people that have beaten him are Mateusz Gamrot and Islam Makhachev. So I think Arman Tsarukyan versus Dustin Poirier would be a great addition to a UFC 300 card. Make it happen. I know people could make, but we could do Dustin Poirier versus Oliveira too. Or, we've seen those fights. But we could do Dustin Poirier versus Nate Diaz when he comes back. It sounds like an amazing idea, I get it, but I'm also one of these guys where I've just got to see the best fight the best. I don't care if Nate Diaz wants to come back, fair enough. Arman Tsarukyan's got his own career, and he's been working his way up recently. He needs somewhere to go, and Dustin Poirier needs to be the guy that lets him go somewhere he needs to give him somewhere to go, and that is against him in a matchup. Make it happen. I don't care if it's not going to happen or if it's unlikely to happen. There's some fights here that I do think the UFC are going to make that I don't have much power over, but I want to see Arman Tsarukyan versus Dustin Poirier. I want to see Poirier actually tested against an up-and-comer in his division that isn't a superstar. Is that so much to ask for? Make that matchup happen. Do Arman Tsarukyan versus Dustin Poirier, Gaethje versus Makhachev for the belt, and then do Charles Oliveira versus Mateusz Gamrot. McGregor fights Chandler, and maybe McGregor gets the winner of one of those matchups for his own title shot if he does win against Chandler. We'll see. Brady Dariush lost in the main event against Dustin Poirier. Really bad loss for him as well. It wasn't a good loss whatsoever. Him versus Dan Hooker is the matchup that I want to see happen. I think it makes sense purely because of the time that they're going to be out for. I'd rather see Brady Dariush retire, in all honesty, but if he is going to come back, he's going to need some time off because he did just get KO'd, and this has been 2 TKO losses back-to-back for him. Dan Hooker just broke his arm again. He was supposed to be fighting Bobby Green this weekend. I'm sure Green is annoyed about that because he got dealt Jalen Turner instead. Brady Dariush versus Dan Hooker is the matchup to happen. They're both going to be back around the same time. Dan Hooker even called him out a while ago. He said, what did he say? I can't remember, but he called him out. I'm your man, friend, whenever you want to go. That's what he said a while ago. Brady Dariush is looking for a fight. I'm your man, friend, whenever you want to go. That's what he said a long time ago on the microphone. You can look it up. It was a call out that he made. I reckon you could make a decent fight between those two. Brady Dariush, Dan Hooker, when they're both back. International Fight Week, whatever UFC card that's going to be in July. We move on to another fighter. Jalen Turner got a big win against Bobby Green, one of the biggest wins in his career for sure. Probably the biggest win in the biggest spotlight of his career. I don't think he's earned like a Rafael Fiziev next, because I don't think he's only just got back on track with this. He lost to Dan Hooker before it. I don't think we should be giving him jump ups right now. I think he needs another win. Then we can talk about jumping up the rankings. Jalen Turner versus Benoit Saint-Denis. Benoit Saint-Denis had a dominant performance in his last fight against Matt Frevola. Jalen Turner just had a dominant performance in his last fight against Bobby Green. It just happened. They're on similar schedules. They're probably going to be looking to return around the same time. UFC Fight Night Paris, co-main event. Jalen Turner, Benoit Saint-Denis. it makes sense as a matchup to happen, in my opinion. Although I'd love to see Benoit get a jump up the rankings and Jalen get a jump up the rankings. We don't know when Fiziev going to be back. We don't know when Dariush is going to be back. So Dan Hooker is a good matchup for him. And plus Dan Hooker did beat Jalen Turner, which is now a really good win in hindsight. Other than that, these two have got to fight each other in the co-main event of UFC Fight Night Paris. The winner of that can then look up the rankings into the top 5 or top 7 to try and get themselves in a position to earn a title elimination bout next. So, Jalen Turner, Benoit Saint Denis, April, UFC Fight Night Paris, co-main event to maybe like a Cyril Gane, Tom Aspinall main event, who knows, seeing as they are going to protect John Jones and let Stipe fight him. Bobby Green, loser of the co-main event. Purely schedule-wise, I do want to see him take some time off, so maybe he won't be able to make UFC 300. I just know this is what the UFC is going to do if he beats Tony Ferguson. Paddy Pimblett versus Bobby Green. What are they going to do? Pimblett versus Fiziev? You know, I mean, I just don't... There's no other matchup right now that can generate a ton of hype for Paddy Pimblett that is actually a winnable matchup for him. And seeing as Bobby Green's coming off a KO loss, I feel like there's going to be a ton of hype around him. Not going to be a ton of hype around him, but I feel like it's going to be an approachable matchup for Paddy Pimblett into the rankings if he does beat Tony Ferguson. I don't know if Pimblett gets ranked if he beats Ferguson. I reckon he'll be number 17, number 16 outside the rankings. Bobby Green is still going to be ranked by the time this Tuesday comes around and the rankings change. That's Paddy Pimblett's way into the rankings. It's a big name. It's a winnable fight. He's coming off a KO loss. He's getting old. He can talk the talk. He can have a fun press conference. I reckon it's going to be Bobby Green versus Paddy Pimblett. Make that fight happen. I don't even know if I want that fight to happen, but Bobby Green has been calling for it. And Pimblett's even been calling for it. And I know the UFC are going to do this matchup, so that's why I've put it here. We move on. Davis and Figueiredo got an amazing win against Rob Font. Wicked win from Davis and Figueiredo, dude. 30-27, one of my favourite fighters, Davison, but he sort of fell off a bit recently, hasn't been around, hasn't been making much noise, and now he's come back and he's boom. Top 10 in the bantamweight division, beating Rob Font. Next matchup, Peter Yan. Make it happen. Figueiredo took little to no damage in that fight. He's getting older. I think he's about 35, 36 years of age. Davison Figueiredo versus Peter Yan in March. Quick turnaround for Davison Figueiredo. Doesn't have to... He's made week-long turnarounds before to fight Brandon Moreno after beating Alex Perez in the first place, so... We know Figueiredo's not scared of a quick turnaround, and he didn't take much damage against Rob Font. Got hit with a couple of shots, but no markings on his face, no concussions, no getting knocked down or dropped or cuts open on his face or broken bones as far as we know, fingers crossed. Davis and Figueiredo versus Peter Yan, UFC 299, main card, make it happen. I think this would be a sick matchup, and there was a time when Yan was the bantamweight champ and Figueiredo was the flyweight champ, and there was interest between those two fighting. Now we get that matchup in the end anyway. Figueiredo versus Yan is the fight to make, in my opinion, especially now that Figueiredo's proven himself in the division. Make it happen. If not, do Yan versus Dominic Cruz. But I think this is more of a test for Yan because Cruz, a little bit more hit and miss than Figueiredo's been. We move on. Rob Font lost in the feature fight against Davis and Figueiredo. Really tough loss for him. Got to use him. He's not a big name. He's not too promotable. He's got a ranking spot. Jonathan Martinez is coming off a very good win against Adrian Yanez himself. Just underneath Rob Font in the rankings. He needs somewhere to go. He needs to move up the rankings. Rob Font's not a big name. It's not like you're going to use him in a massive super fight against another guy at the top 5 coming off a loss. Rob Font, Jonathan Martinez. Font didn't take too much damage either. He got wobbled here and there, but compared to some Font fights, that was light for him. Plus, he's getting up there. I say do this around May, 5 months from now. May, prelims of a pay-per-view, co-main event of the prelims, maybe even a feature fight of a main card of a fight night. Rob Font versus Jonathan Martinez is a sick matchup, in my opinion, and would be a very fun fight, and would be a test for both of them for sure, to see if Rob Font still got it, or if Jonathan Martinez is going to start making a run in that bantamweight division. And it's a striking matchup for Font, which is always fun for Font. We move on. Up the card, Sean Brady absolutely dominated Kelvin Gastelum, took 0 damage whatsoever. There's a guy who's probably going to be looking to fight again soon, and although I'd love to match Gilbert Burns against a winner of Ian Gary, Shavkat Rakhmonov, or maybe against a... What other matchup is it? Against a winner of Ian Gary versus Vicente Luque, or maybe against a winner of Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Wonderboy. I think... Who knows what's going to happen to them in December? Maybe they get injured. Maybe they get knocked down in a fight and don't come back until May. I think Brady took no damage in that fight whatsoever. So Brady, you've got momentum. I think this is a great grappling matchup between the two of them. Brady's got to move up the rankings somewhere. I don't want to see him versus like Neil Magny after he bounces back. Respect to Neil Magny, but still. Don't want to see that. Sean Brady versus Gilbert Burns. Grappler on grappler. Let's neutralize one of them and do this in March or April of next year. I think that would be a sick matchup, and you could do it on like the main card of a pay-per-view, co-main event of a fight night. You could even do an Apex main event with these two with a solid undercard. I'm going to mention. I reckon it's the fight to make purely scheduling-wise, because I don't see Burns wanting to wait around until May or June for one of these other guys to win their matchup, when he could just maybe try and get back in there against Brady, who just won. We move on. Kelvin Gastelum got a big win in the... Kelvin Gastelum got absolutely dominated by Sean Brady. Career on the ropes. I don't know why I said big win. Chaos Williams for fun and banter. Striking matchup. KO artist coming off wins. Not too active. Kelvin didn't take any damage. It's not like he went through a war. He got dominated on the ground and then got a Kimura done to him. I don't think he even broke his arm. He tapped. So it's one of these situations where I'm just like, okay, well, Kelvin, we're not going to put you against a guy in the rankings. You're not ranked at welterweight. You're not ranked at middleweight anymore after this loss. Him versus Chaos Williams is a fun matchup that will bring people's eyes to it. If Kelvin does want to continue, and if he wins that one, then we can start talking about him versus other matchups. Miesha Tate won against Julia Avila as an underdog for some bizarre reason. Up the rankings is Holly Holm. Keep Miesha Tate active. Bring her back. I don't want to put her on UFC 300. No women's MMA on 300. $2.99 March. Miesha Tate, Holly Holm. The rematch, it sells a little bit because there's some promo to it because they had a first fight where Holly Holm was winning and Miesha Tate came back to win the belt against her. So there's some history there. I think it's time to activate the rematch. The winner of that can look towards a title elimination bout in the women's bantamweight division. By the way, check the rankings. Women's featherweight division is gone from the rankings. There's hope for us yet. These are the matchups I want to see happen. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Toodle pip. Goodbye.